Well, I am live. That's what it says. We are live. How is the sound? How is the audio going? I hope everyone can hear our class tonight. Hey, Matt. Good to hear from you. We're going to be in the book of Matthew tonight, Matthew chapter 10. And I really appreciate everyone's involvement. It's interesting. I can see how many people are kind of popping in and out. Also with this, I can also see who was waiting or how many people were waiting for the show to start. Just and technology is absolutely amazing. And maybe it took the coronavirus to get moving on some of this. Okay, so let's move on in our text in Matthew. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 10 and in verse 16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. But beware of men, for they will hand you over to the courts and scourge you in their synagogues. And you will be even brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they hand you over, do not worry about how or what you are to say, for it will be given you in that hour what you are to say. At least this text here, I think is pretty clear that the application is to the apostles. That is, we're talking about inspiration. And that's not a promise that we have. We don't have this promise of inspiration before kings and governors. And then it says, for it is not you who speak, but it is the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. What we'd have today is we would have scripture. A person asks us a Bible question, we would give them a Bible answer. 1 Peter chapter 4 and in verse 11. Brethren, brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. You'll be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who has endured to the end who will be saved. But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. A couple observations on that. First of all, despite all their courage, the messengers of Jesus were not to seek martyrdom as soon as they could. It was allowed to move on. Is that you did not have to stay and die. I mean, if you were asked to either deny Christ or be put to death, then you have to stay with Christ. But as far as movement, they were allowed to move. It says until the Son of Man comes. I don't think this is the second coming, or we would still have some very old people on the planet today. But I think the coming here is the coming that he will talk about in chapter 24. That would be a coming as well. That is spoken of, that they would see the Son of Man in the clouds. That is the destruction of Jerusalem. The thought seems to be that some of the apostles would still be preaching in Israel, in the territory of Israel, what had been Israel or Judea, when Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70. That would still be going on. It indicates to me that the Jewish nation was given a tremendous amount of opportunity to change their ways, to repent. For some 40 years after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, Jesus sent the best messengers that he had to try to persuade them to change. You will see that in Acts 2, Acts 3, Acts 4, Acts 7, Acts 8, and in numerous passages, you will see the attempt to try to get them to change. I mean, God really sent his best messengers of the time to try to convince them. I mean, think of the sermons that the people heard that Peter gave. Think of the great sermon that Stephen gave in Acts chapter 7. And also think of the sermons that Saul of Tarsus or Paul would give as he would go through various cities. And first of all, be at the synagogue and be preaching there. So in verse 24, it says, and we're coming to a question here in our handout, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above his master. It is enough for the disciple that he become like his teacher and the slave like his master. If they have called the head of the house Beelzebub, and they did that, they said that he was only casting out demons by the the prince of demons. How much more will they malign the members of his household? And so the question is, why does Jesus remind them that a disciple is not above his teacher? Also, as you noted on your screen, there is an option to send me a message as far as there's a chat section. And so that's kind of neat on this format. I know last night's format I really like because I can see you. I can see you. But I know a number of people, I don't know what about it is, but the idea of being seen, they're not a fan of it. I kind of learned this when we did our online Bible show. There were a number of preachers that were very hesitant about coming on live. One thought was they felt they weren't the best at thinking on their feet, and so being live and etc. and people be able to see it. So I know I was nervous the first time I did it, but hey, let's give this a whirl. Interesting statement. A disciple is not above his teacher, and I think the idea there is that the apostles cannot serve Jesus and escape persecution at the same time. It's easy to think that we can make Christianity into more of a user-friendly version, almost like a version that is far more popular, that people will like us and far more acceptable, a message that is far more acceptable to the world. But I mean, when you think of men like Paul was an amazing man, and Romans 9 loved his people, and yet, I mean, he was stoned and ran out of town, and it's just interesting. It's interesting that the early Christians were amazing people. You look at Timothy, you look at Paul, you look at the compassion and faithfulness of such individuals, and yet it was the message that the people did not like. This idea of a crucified Messiah was repugnant to them, and to many people today, it's repugnant because it says you're a sinner. It says that there's something not right about you, and that's a hard thing for people to swallow. So Jesus here warns the apostles that they cannot expect better treatment than himself, nor should they ask. McGarvey says they should not ask exemption from what he himself suffered. And so we need to be careful of thinking like, oh, I think I can repackage the gospel. I can make it more acceptable. I just need to find the right pitch, or it's our fault. It's our fault that people don't like the gospel. There's another statement here. It says, therefore do not fear them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the darkness, speak in the light, and what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim upon the housetops. I think that's an interesting verse. How does knowing that everything is going to be exposed help us with confidence and avoid the trap of fearing men? One thing that struck me was God's bigger than your opponent, and the truth will prevail. And it's all going to come out. It's just all going to come out. For God's people, it will be a total vindication at the judgment. You were a faithful Christian. You were doing what you should have been doing. And following the Bible was the right thing to do. Getting rid of the sins that you got rid of, putting on the new man and adopting those virtues, that was right. That was the good thing to do. I think of God when he says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? At the judgment, it's going to kind of be like that if you were faithful, God's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Hey, that was my servant there. All the lies will be exposed at the judgment. And there's something else. All the motivations will be exposed as well. That is the reason that people did things. The real reason for why they didn't serve God is going to come out of the judgment. I see that in passages like Hebrews chapter 4 about the word of God that's able to pierce as far as the division of soul and spirit, and is able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. I think also of 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body. It's my understanding the word appear there means that you're exposed as you are, that God sees exactly who you are. And I think everything is the mask. The mask comes off at the judgment. And I guess that's why it's better to take it off now. It's better to take it off now. And I don't know, maybe that's what we went through when we were baptized, is we came forward and we said, I need help. I'm a sinner. I believe that Jesus is the Christ. He's the only answer for my sins. I can't save myself. I repent and I'm willing to confess him as my Lord. I need a Lord. I'm a horrible Lord of my life. And I submit to baptism in water for the forgiveness of my sins. And that was taking off the mask. That's kind of what that was. We were just taking off the mask and say, let's just come clean. Let's just come clean here. And this is who we are. This is who I am, and this is what I need. And I'm not pretending to be somebody that I'm not. And I like that about the Christian life, because I think the Christian life really emphasizes that. It emphasizes you need other people. You need the encouragement that other people offer. You need their wisdom. You need their advice. You need to meet with people. You need them in your life. You need ongoing forgiveness. You need the blood of Christ. There's the need to confess. There's the need to help other people. There's the need to be involved. All of that, and that you're not perfect, and that we're working towards maturity. And so I think also in this passage here, it is you've got the truth, and so you got to proclaim it on that. Now, it's not a truth you invented, and so don't be arrogant about it. You got the truth, proclaim it on from the housetops. Real history, the history that God records, the history that will stand at the last day, will reveal that you had the truth, and so proclaim it on the housetops. In the verses that follow, it says, and this is one that comes up, there's a number of, and I know this has been around for a long time because I know Vine in his dictionary on New Testament words kind of dealt with this or made a comment relating to this. And it's verse 28, do not fear those who kill the body. You go like, well, that's easier said than done. But I love the clarity here. I like the clarity in the verse because he says, but are unable to kill the soul. Rather fear whom is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Now, other people have come upon the same truth. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, he was an individual that was in a concentration camp, and he would watch. And it was not everybody. It was just, he talked about the few. There were a few prisoners in the concentration camps that would go along and check on everyone else and see how they were doing, and would go in and try and encourage people. And there were a few prisoners that would give their last piece of bread to somebody else who they thought needed it more than they needed it. And it dawned on him that the Nazis could like strip them of all their possessions and etc. But there's one thing that could never be taken from them, and that was their power to choose, free will choice, their power to choose how they would react, and their power to choose how they would view the circumstances. No one can ever take that from you, no matter how difficult. Even in the concentration camp, someone can't take that from you. You still are in complete control about how you view life, how you view reality, and whether you count your blessings and that. And it was just just one of those things, just one of those moments of clarity. And other people have gone through the same thing. Solzhenitsyn went through the same thing when he was in the Gulag. Actually, he writes like thank you prison, because he makes a comment in that. He makes a comment there where he talks about, thank you prison, and thank you this rotting straw that I'm lying on, and absolutely, just a miserable existence being out in Siberia. Yet he said it finally taught him that the meaning of life, that what life is all about, is not the acquisition of possessions, which he said we've all been taught and all been told. It's about the maturity of the soul. And this is one of those places where you see a comment like that and you go like, that's a great comment, but you go like, but actually the Bible said it long before, just in different words, when he says, don't be afraid of the people that can, kill your body or bring suffering upon you physically. Understand this, they can't touch your soul. They have no power. They have no power there. They have no power in the soul. And that's why I think Justin Martyr was the one who talked about that whatever good things, wise things men have said belong to Christians, because in a sense that whatever amazing statement people have made out there or a truth they've stumbled upon, it's probably a truth that you've already found in Scripture, just worded differently. It was already there long ago. And so long ago, there was this idea that, yeah, men can persecute you, they can chase you, they can make your life difficult, they can make your life physically painful, they can take away your food and clothing. They might even be able to take away your physical freedom where they put you in a cell, but they can't touch your soul. Only you can do damage to your soul. And I think that would be proper when you look at passages like, resist the devil and he will flee from you. Even the devil cannot damage your soul without your signing off on it, without your permission. That, like, the devil can't get into your life unless you give him a spare key or your password or a way of entrance. And that's a place that's something that no one else can touch. That you remain in complete control of the spiritual aspect of you. But the question comes up. Sometimes people argue that it talks about the word destroy here. Talks about destroy both soul and body in hell. And some people looked at that word destroyed and say, well, that just kind of sounds like God's going to obliterate the soul in hell. And so thus they come to like this position of hell is just annihilation. There's weeping and gnashing of teeth, but it lasts like momentary, very briefly, and then you're gone. And you just cease to exist. Okay. Couple problems with that is Vine noted that the word destroy here does not mean to annihilate. It means not the loss of being, but a loss of well-being. And so that's really, I think, the idea here. I think even the context bears this out. Because if hell is annihilation, nothingness, then doesn't man accomplish the same thing when he destroys your body? And it just seems like that. How is it that the version of hell that's annihilation is actually the heaven for the atheist, just non-existent? That is, if you're just annihilated after you die, then hasn't the person who has killed you basically accomplished that already, if there's just nothing after death? So, yeah. So those are just along with that. There are just too many other passages along that same line. One other said, if the disciple is going to yield to the low motive of fear, then let him be scared, not of the minor danger, but of the supreme danger. Boy, isn't that the truth? We get fearful about these little side issues, and we don't see the real big issue, the thing that we actually need to be serious about and concerned about. A couple of the points I had to make on this were, too many other passages on the topic of life after death for the lost. Too many other passages have clearly a state of consciousness, like in Luke 16, rich man lifted up his eyes being in torment. Consciousness, awareness, very aware. He knew who Lazarus was, he knew who Father Abraham was, and he knew exactly how many brothers he had. and he knew they were not right with God. I mean, he knew all that, very aware. He was very aware. Revelation 20 also speaks of the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and it would be hard for me to understand, like, well, wait a minute, how could annihilation ever be spoken of as torment? Because once you annihilate something, I mean, it's impossible to torment it now. But in Revelation 20, particularly, and chapter 14, you have the language that those that end up in the lake of fire, that the torment, not necessarily that, the sentence is forever, but that the punishment or the torment is forever as well. Not only that, but the ongoing language of weeping and gnashing of teeth, not that they weep and gnash and that's it, of Matthew 8. And Mark 9 also, Mark 9, about 43 and following, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. That to me that seems very strange language if we're talking about a place of nothingness, of complete annihilation, of the end of existence, of, wait a minute, Jesus talked about this being a place of ongoing corruption where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. It seems like that if there's nobody actually there, if everyone that was cast into hell is immediately annihilated, then has not the fire been quenched and has not the worm died, if there's nothing there to, you might say metaphorically, to feast upon? So those are just some thoughts there, to keep that in mind. But next section here, he says, are not two sparrows sold for a cent, and yet none of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, you're more valuable than many sparrows. I think that should make us feel amazing, is that God says, I'm fully aware of everything in your life. We often talk that God is aware of, like, the price of a loaf of bread and a quart of milk and a pound of butter, but God's aware of all the things going in your life. God's even aware of how many hairs you presently have on your head and how many hairs you're going to have tomorrow morning after you take a shower. I mean, God knows all of that, very intimately connected with your life. Yeah. Okay. He says there in verse 32, therefore everyone who confesses me before men, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. What's that look like? What's confession look like? And I like something Matt said. Matt had kind of pointed out here that, the idea of, like, fear him. And I think it's not the dread, but I think the fear is awe, respect, like the Proverbs, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And that's been one of those interesting things in my life as a Christian, of obviously God is my Father. And so you go, like, well, how does this whole fear thing work? And you got the element of love and that sort of thing. But I think the thought is that God is still God and God is still my creator. And I should always, even though there is to be an intimate relationship there as a child and a father, there is always a tremendous amount of respect. And I think we see that in the book of Revelation, where the angels will call out and the creatures around the throne will call out, holy, holy, holy. There's an intense love there that is linked with an intense awe at the same time. So I think I know a lot of people, I think, get kind of mixed up on that. Well, I fear God, and it's just like, well, be in dread of him. Where if you're not right with him, Hebrews chapter 12, he's not someone to mess with, and in the sense of trifle, maybe that'd be the better word. He's not someone to trifle with, and you see that in the Old Testament, and you see that with Ananias and Sapphira as well. It's easy to confess in private, but this is before men. And I think we've had classes before where we've noted that confession here is more than assent. It's more than I agree. Um, it's I believe and I obey. It's the word disciple. I'm an adherent. I'm a follower. I'm all in. And not only that, but it is a very specific confession. It's more than, well, I'm a religious person. It's more than, I believe in something out there. I think the problem with the idea, I believe in something out there, is that there's something out there never makes any demands of you. I mean, the people I've known who have said, well, I believe in something out there. Well, the something out there, there's no communication they have from the something out there. We certainly have a communication from the creator, but the something out there never makes any demands on them. And not only that, but the vague something out there always seems to sign off on whatever they want to do at the moment. And that's that's a big difference between that and God, because God's ways are not our ways in the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, 8 and 9. And God does not just sign off on everything we want to do. It's a reverse. We sign off on what He has said. Even if it like we looked at last night when Habakkuk said, I'm going to stand on the rampart and wait for God's response and wait when I'm rebuked. I mean, he says, you know, I know I don't see something here. I know I'm going to be corrected, and I'm willing to be corrected. I'm willing to be set straight. And so, and it's confessing me. It's specific here. And that would be, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. It's, I believe that Jesus is the Savior of the world. I believe that Jesus is the Lord. I believe He rose from the dead. I believe, as Acts 4:12 says, and John chapter 14 and verse 6 says, He is the only way to the Father. It's interesting. Jesus in Matthew 16 will ask His disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And there was Elijah, there was Jeremiah, there was John the Baptist risen from the dead, there was one of the prophets. And those were, like, you might say, well, those are complementary. But they're not, because none of that's even close to who Jesus is. He's the Christ. He's the Son of the living God. He's God in the flesh. That's who Jesus is. And so it's just not enough to say, well, I can. A lot of times people want, well, I confess He was a good teacher. I'm going to confess He was a good man. I'm going to confess that He had a lot of wise things to say, but that's nothing close to, I confess that He's the Son of God. Ron Joyner made a good point, to live is Christ, to die is gain. Also, I think the statement in Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live. Christ lives in me. That would be also a good example of what an ongoing confession would be. Ken McCoy makes a great observation that it's not just enough to say, I mean, there's a lot of people that can talk a good talk, but for the confession to be what we would say valid or meaningful, it needs to be backed up by how we're living. It needs to be backed up by our words in our life, because it's easy to be turned off by the person who has a good talk, but there's no walk there. That confession seems rather meaningless, and people are turned off by it. Not only that, but you can. It's interesting. The book of Titus, chapter 1, verse 6. It says, they confess that they know God, but by their deeds they deny Him. That's Titus chapter 1, verse 16. You can confess Christ with your voice and yet deny Him with your life. Or as one writer said, we may deny Him by our silence when there was the opportunity to speak some word for Christ, to utter some protest against evil, to take some stand, to show what side we are on. Again and again on such occasions, it's easier to keep silent than to speak. Then He says in Matthew chapter 10, do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. That statement, do not think, that really, that grabs my attention, because it's almost like Jesus is saying, So many people are going to get the wrong idea. I've got a red wreath in the background that I'm trying to block out with my hands and keep myself all centered. Maybe next time I should take that down. But don't think I came to bring peace on the earth. It's and I don't know about you, but growing up a home that was a religious home, but not the Lord's church home. Around the holidays, you know, peace on earth. That statement in the book of Luke, but Luke points out, because that always confused me. I think as a child, that wait a minute, if Jesus came to bring peace on earth, then why have there been so many wars since in the last century? The Great War, the World War One, the Second World War, Korea, Vietnam, etc. And it just kind of it looked like that the Bible didn't really know what it was talking about when it was viewed that way. But I remember the first time I read the Gospels, and I read that and I go like, here's that phrase I always heard at the holidays in different songs or Christmas cards, and it was peace on earth, but it was peace on earth to men that God is pleased with. And all of a sudden it's like, okay. I see what he's promising there. He wasn't promising like some earthly utopia or gonna fix all your problems. He was promising peace to people that would serve him. Okay, that makes a big difference. So I think Jesus is kind of maybe taking the X to a little bit of misconception. One misconception is that God is supposed to make my life easier. I didn't come to bring peace on the earth. I did. Now I think in living the Christian life, my life has been easier than the non-Christian life, because there's a statement in the Proverbs, I think it's chapter 13, that the way of the treacherous is hard. So I would have to say that living the Christian life in the long run, the overall picture, has been a lot easier than living a non-Christian life. And yet there's been a number of aspects that haven't been easy at all, but maybe it's more of that a lot better consequences have shown up in living a Christian life, or a lot better blessings have shown up. Maybe that's the easy part, that the daily stuff was not necessarily easier. Been easy to retreat and just not have the hard conversations or make the corrections you need to make, or work on your marriage or whatever, or try to stay on top of parenting. That part was, but the blessings that showed up brought a much better life. I think he's saying that, I'm not, what was the old Lynn Anderson song? What was it? I didn't promise you a rose garden sort of thing. He's saying here that, hey, I'm not guaranteeing you that your faith is going to always be a comfortable thing to live out. And I'm here to fix your biggest problem, but I'm not here to necessarily fix all the smaller ones. And I'm not going to remove all the suffering and pain from the world. That would be the parable of the tares. No, good and evil are going to coexist until the end of time. And I didn't come to make a world a perfect place, because everyone's not going to buy into it. There's effort demanded upon your part. So, beware of the easy. Beware of the easy. I guess that's why I'm very leery of socialism, because socialism / communism tend to promise a utopia that will bring with our intellect and etc. It seems to promise that if you vote for us, you will get an easy job. It will pay well. No way you could get fired, and you won't have to do much. It will promise you easy health care, an easy education or whatever, that it's this promise of easy. And you go like, wait a minute, how is that going to work? And so be careful about buying into earthly utopian sort of man's dreams. Because I think Jesus, it's interesting that the Bible does not offer that. The Bible says you become a Christian, you're going to be persecuted. 2 Timothy chapter 3, about verse 12. Acts chapter 14, 22, it's through many tribulations that you enter the kingdom of God. Matthew chapter 5, blessed are when men persecute you and revile you, etc. Beware when all men speak well of you, all those passages. So I love that about Christianity because it's completely honest about the cost. It's not that, hey, someone else will pay the cost and you'll have it easy. No, you've got to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, Philippians chapter 2. And so you're not being offered what is easy. I think that's on the broad road. That's where what looks like it's easy, but turns out it's not easy after all. Then he says, whoever denies me before men, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. I do not think I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not came to bring peace but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be the members of his household. Wow. The sword that Jesus brought, and it's not, let's be clear on this, it's not God's fault for this division. I mean, Jesus worked miracles. He was raised from the dead. The Bible has all sorts of evidence behind it. There should be no division here. The division here is what happens when sin enters, not what happens necessarily because of righteousness is there or because truth is there. It's John chapter 3. Everyone should embrace the light, but John 3 says, men did not want the light because their deeds were evil and they did not want to be exposed. And that's what creates the camps here. It's the darkness that creates the camps. One writer said, Jesus is the sharpest line of separation between men and the greatest disturber of easy consciences. To be confronted with Jesus is necessarily to be confronted with the choice whether to accept him or to reject him. And the world is always divided into those who have accepted Christ and those who have not. And love for the old, particularly the people Jesus is talking here in the immediate context, love for the old faith that was in the Old Testament will move the members of the Jewish families to persecute from those that give their hearts to Christ. And 1 Corinthians talks about this, both also Jewish and pagan. When Paul says to the Jews, it was a stumbling block. Jesus Christ, him crucified, the center of the gospel. To the Jews, that's a stumbling block. And to the Gentiles, foolishness. And so, Jesus is that great dividing line between, man, he kind of sits down right in the middle of the road. And are you for me or are you against me? And that's no wonder he's spoken of as a shepherd at the end that separates the sheep from the goats, because there's a sense that in this life he's separated anyway, as you have the narrow way and the broad way. So it's just that thought of whatever it costs, whatever it takes, whatever sacrifices I must make to follow Jesus, I will. I read something humorous the other day. It talked about marriage. And it talked about how whether the family culture survives in the new marriage. And someone said one interpretation of marriage is it's where two families send their best warriors out to do battle, and it will be determined which family culture survives in the new marriage. I thought that was really interesting, because it is that, because you leave father and mother and you join to your wife, and hopefully if mom and dad were faithful Christians, then the culture that wins out in the marriage that came out of that family is a marriage of faithful Christians. But I've never heard marriage described that way, of two families and they send their warriors out, and what will be determined is which family culture survives into the future. Boy, that's something to think about. Someone has always said that for better or ill, whoever you marry that you bring into the family will alter the family. We'll just kind of alter the family. And hopefully, you're bringing in someone, I'm bringing in someone that only improves it, and things are even like better even in the next generation. So interesting thoughts that you run into. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it. So in these final verses I'm looking at, like interesting, what's involved in trying to find your life, and what does that result in losing your life? Now, the first thing I think we'd note is a man that finds his life in this section doesn't actually find real life. He finds what he thinks is life, or maybe he preserves his life. He's not willing to be persecuted. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to renounce Christ and things like that. So I can live longer. This virus has really made me think about this. I certainly don't want it to take me out. I still have some plans, things that I want to do. But I was thinking last night in bed, if after this, if I'm just the same old person, do I even want to live? Have you ever thought about that? There was a statement I read today that David Brooks had talked about, someone making a quote like, the person said, you need to choose God. You need to choose God to worship, because if you choose money, you'll never have enough. And if you don't choose God, whatever you choose will eat you alive. If you choose pleasure, and if you choose pleasure, and that would be like the body and the pleasures that go with the body, then as you age, you're going to die 1,000,000 deaths before they plant you. And boy, that really caught my mind. And I said, man, that's true. That's true. That is, if I have another 20 years of my life, but I'm not going to be any different, and I'm not going to improve, and I'm not going to grow, and I'm not really going to work on the things I need to work on, then I'm consigning myself to dying 1,000,000 little deaths. It would be better just to die. It would. That's something really to think about, that if I'm going to live through this, then let's come out the other end different, so that as I grow old, it's just not, should have done that, I should have done that, I should have done that, I'm not the Christian I need to be, whatever. Boy, that does not sound like an enjoyable future. And so maybe like use this window and grab it and say, I want to be everything I want to be. Scott Copeland makes a good stop from Micah 7. Family can't save. Only God can save. I remember realizing that on a physical level years ago, because there was a couple of things I was afraid of as a child. Nuclear holocaust and being buried alive. And I realized, that I would wake up in a coffin and they'd buried me and I wasn't dead. Just two things that I lay in bed at night thinking about. And I finally realized that mom and dad in the next room couldn't fix any of that. That there were things that were beyond the scope of mom and dad. Mom and dad couldn't help me with that at all. Mom and dad were powerless over whether Russia and the United States ever got into nuclear war. And mom and dad were pretty powerless over too, whether I was buried alive or not. I think, it's like, I don't think you're going to be able to help me with that one. And that, boy, is that, I don't know, that was just a moment of clarity of, there are things your parents can't help you with. And so maybe that left the door open for me to let God into my life. When I look in these verses, it's comfort above conviction. I think what Jesus says is, a lot of people feel like, hey, Jesus, you're in second place. No, that's not good enough. There's a story in my family. There's a story about every kid in the family that is kind of like and the story about Mark is that Mark was in a bicycle race years ago, a 10-speed bike. My brother had just gotten a Schwinn Continental. We went to Monmouth, Oregon. I got in a bicycle race and I got third place. The rest of the story is there were only 3 riders in the race, and so that was the joke. Mark's third place finish, but there were only 3 people in the race. That doesn't make third place sound very good. And along that lines, second place is really good, except you're God. If you're God, then that's not a place where you put God. You do not put God in second place. I'm fine if my wife puts me in second place. God's first place. In fact, someone has noted, marry someone that loves God more than they love you. What does Brian Haynes call it? Find someone godly and jobly. I love that expression. It's easy to say, me and Cindy were talking about this afternoon. There's a number of people, even like Oprah, that are getting into spirituality. And they're talking a lot about wholeness. The trouble is they want wholeness, but they don't want holiness. And there's a big difference, because there's a number of people that they want a level of spirituality, but they can still like live with their boyfriend or whatever. They still have some stuff that they can do. I want wholeness, but no, holiness. God wants us to be holy, and putting him first is the path to holiness. Knowing that, but if you never get on the path to holiness, I would argue you will never find wholeness, because wholeness involves the soul. And the soul's not whole unless it's holy and doing what God says. It's interesting to me that there are people that I'm reading. They're people that are moving towards God. They're very important people in the culture, but they're moving towards God as they're getting older. They're talking more about God or spirituality and etc. But almost in the writing, an undercurrent of the writing is, but I don't want to become radical. I don't want to become like a zealot or anything. But what the interesting thing is? That the people they admire that are in their books, the people that they quote from centuries past, were zealots. Yeah, if Jesus was a zealot, right? I mean, the zeal for thy house has consumed me. The Apostle Paul, the love of Christ controls us. Right? Peter, as long as I'm in this body, I'm going to stir you up by way of remembrance in 2 Peter chapter 1. Daniel, Joseph, Moses, they were zealots. They were all in. So don't be someone who admires the people that were all in, but never is willing to pay the price yourself. Don't just say I can kind of make it. I can kind of make it. Matt Taylor brings in Matthew 11:28. Come to me all year, heavy laden. Heavy laden. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. I would think that would be a great Bible definition of wholeness. Interesting where you find it. You got to put his yoke upon you, and that yoke is his level of responsibility, a commitment to him, and vows to him. And it's that. I think you're right. I think taking that yoke upon you is the only way to find wholeness. Too many people have decided, well, I can make it work. There's a way I can work around this. Here's the thing. When I was younger, when I was a young kid, I had this idea that passages like this applied to the early Christians, but they didn't apply to the rest of us. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If you're going to get the reward of the early Christians and the faith of the early Christians, how's that going to happen without the dedication of them and the love they had for God? So there's no shortcuts here. You can't serve two masters. So Matt Walsh wrote something interesting. He says there's just too many Christians today that speak just like non-Christians, just like them, carry themselves as they do, watches all the same television shows, consumes the same kind of media, indulges in the same vices, feels the same lack of guilt for those indulgences. He says everything's the same. There's too many professed believers that they're no different from the world. And I don't know, I want to be different from the world. You pray for me and I'll pray for you. I want to be different from the world. I don't want to buy into a toned down, watered down version of things. Jesus here declares that all self seeking is self losing. Put yourself first and you're going to lose. He makes his own life the chief object of um, his endeavor. That is, the person that makes the chief object of their life their own endeavor really fails more than they seem to succeed. There's just a principle here. Put yourself first. It seems like it. The devil convinces us, hey, you're going to miss out. You put yourself first. And if you put yourself first, that sort of thing, you're going to get what you need. And Jesus says, no, you're not. How many people have we seen that have been so into career, etc., that lost their wife and children in the process? Ecclesiastes 4 talks about a person like that they're laboring. They never ask, like, what am I doing all this all for? And they have no family. They have nobody in their life anymore because the career, whatever, pushed everything out. Losing your life for Christ is simply living our life for Him, spending our life in His cause, and in the process finding true life here and in eternity. Okay, I think that's it for this episode. This has been interesting. This has been an interesting format. So I'm going to think about it. I believe that next Wednesday night, I think we will do our regular scheduled class, this class that would be scheduled. And I think I'm thinking on the Wednesday night class of doing the Zoom presentation, and then of using this format for the Sunday class. But I'm not sure, maybe you could give me your input. I'm not sure where I would put that Sunday class, because I know we're going to have a small group meeting at 10, small group meeting at 5:30. So I'm not sure if I would do our Sunday class like a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon. It just seems like there's, like a Sunday at like 3 o'clock or something like that, doing our Sunday class and using this particular format for the Sunday class. So I'm kind of mulling that over, but I would appreciate your input on all of that. All right. 32 people watching tonight. Thank you. I hope Patrick, did you make it in? So I'm encouraged by your presence. Keep me in your prayers. I'll be praying for you. Let's also keep watching for all the, a lot of us are shut-ins now. Okay. So, all right. Okay. There we go. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah. Let's keep in mind those that are older. That's older, and checking on them. And it's okay just to check on each other. And you doing okay? That sort of thing. So I think that is it for the class tonight. And I'm going to end the stream. So from Studio One here in Beaverton, we will. This is Mark, and Bella. Bella was with me tonight. She's over in the chair. She was listening to the whole program. Oh, okay. Dina just sent me a comment. Dina might need a little bit of help getting Zoom to work. And I'm going to ask if Ken, if you would reach out to Dina on that one. And okay. Oh, Ken made a good comment here. Group leaders probably need to check in with their folks again regarding attendance on Sunday. There was a little bit of confusion there, that where we're staying with the same format. I read what the governor's proclamation was. I called the person at the Oregonian who wrote the story, and here was their take on that and I looked at the list of businesses that were told to shutter down, like tattoo studios, barbershops, etc. We were not on that list. They noted that nonprofits can continue to function, and we are a nonprofit. It looks like here's the rules that we would be under, that we have to select someone that would be like a hall monitor, so to speak, but we would need someone to make sure that non-family members keep 6 feet apart. on Sunday. So I don't know if we're going to see any change in the number show up. Sunday evening, we had about 12 show up. So group leaders, check with your people and see if anything is changing for Sunday. As it is right now, I'm planning on preaching for the small group that meets at 10. That's group 2. And my group, group 1, that meets at 5:30. So, all right. From Studio One, good night, everybody. You guys say good night, Bella? Bella says good night as well.